Good day, class. Today we're going to talk about the negative side of political parties. We've already talked about how political parties are pretty inevitable, that people will join together based on similar ideas. And so political parties are a natural occurrence, maybe not in the formality, but definitely in the ideas that people are going to try and promote ideas that are similar. We talked about the benefits of political parties, that they organize ideas. And generally speaking, they get people to work together. It's a way for you to participate in government. We talked about why the third party isn't that successful in America, why we've always had a two-party system. And today I'm actually going to go into one of the first two parties a little bit, the Federalists and the Democrat Republicans. So I had this lesson titled Political Parties and Corruption, and it's probably a better name would be political party, the downside of political parties, or the consequences of political parties. And we'll talk about those here. Remember, the big essential question we're answering this whole unit is whether political parties are good for the country. I've already given you some reasons as to why they're not, why they are, and I'm going to give you a couple of reasons of why they may not be. I'm going to use a couple of historical examples as well. So we can see corruption or interests of the party ahead of the interests of the country in a couple ways. We could see it in Congress, we could see it in elections, we could actually see it in the workings of government, and believe it or not, we could see it in the media. A lot of this also can be tied to campaign finance or donors or interest groups as well, which we'll talk about in the next couple of units. But you're going to see more of it with political parties than you are with those. So let's talk about Congress first. First off, if you remember way back to the beginning of Market Period 2, when we talked about Congress, we talked about the idea of majority and minority rule. And that the majority is nowadays the person or the political party that controls most of the seats in the Capitol. And the minority would be obviously the one with the least amount of political members. We talked about the party whip is responsible for making sure that all the members of that political party vote in a certain block. This obviously speeds up voting. It is definitely a benefit. But what if someone wants to vote against something that the party doesn't want to vote to? Well, that typically means that they're punished. It means that their bills won't get to the floor as quickly. It means that they might not get funding from the party in the next election. It might mean that they aren't nominated for certain committees that they could have an influence on. And so the party whips have a couple things at their disposal where they can punish someone for not voting with the party in Congress. However, was your congressman or woman sent to Congress to represent you or the party? And so that means if we're going by a party system, and let's say you live in a district where your congressman's Republican and you're a Democrat, does that mean your voice doesn't matter? Well, if they're voting with the party, maybe not. That's what I'm saying. Do they really represent the constituents? Also, I put this example of a committee chair. If someone, let's say someone's been in Congress for a while and they want to become a committee chair of a certain committee, again, the majority party determines who controls the committee. So if it's the Committee on Ways and Means or the Foreign Intelligence Committee or the Appropriations Committee, if you want to be that committee chair and you've been in the party long enough, again, you have to be in the party long enough to get those committee chairs because they're the one who decide it, regardless if you're better at a job or not. There's been some reports that you have to pay to the tune of roughly $600,000 to become that committee chair. Where does that $600,000 go to? Well, it goes to the party. The party also makes sure that members in Congress are responsible for raising money for the party. So not only do they have to raise money for their campaign of re-election, but they also have to raise money for the party. And that party will use that money to pay for certain offices. It may use it to influence elections. So in Congress, there's definitely this tug where people have to decide if they want to support their constituents or the political party. Now, some people who live in a predominantly Republican or Democratic district have that easy. But if they don't, they live in a district that's very moderate, or they have a district that is very diverse in terms of their political leanings, it might be a little bit harder for them to balance the issues of the political party and the needs of the people. So, I'll answer this question for you. Given that all that you know so far, are political parties good for the country in Congress? Elections are also a key role of the political parties. Obviously, they're responsible for putting out plenty of attack ads. Now, interest groups will do this too. The political party attack ads really are just about mudslinging. They're not necessarily about communicating ideas. They're about just marring the character of someone so that someone won't vote for them. If they can convince the public that there's something wrong with them morally, then we won't vote for them. Primaries. Political parties also influence the primaries. How this works is, in primaries, if you remember, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the next unit, which is on elections and campaign finance, is that you'll have candidate A and candidate B up for election. They both belong to the same party, for example. I'll give you a classic example. A couple years ago, we had Sam Royer, who was a representative from Pennsylvania in the Reading area, running for governor, along with Tom Corbett, who eventually became governor. And he, at the time, was the Attorney General. Both Republicans. The political party, and it did so in this case as well, will support an official candidate. That candidate will get all the money. That candidate will get all the support of the party. They'll get all the offices, the county offices of that party will get signs to support that person. Meanwhile, the other person is left raising money on their own. Sometimes the parties will stay out of it and they'll just let them be responsible for their own. But the political parties, in some ways, then throw their weight behind a certain candidate, regardless if that's who the people of that party want them to win or not. So you could have the majority of the party, want someone else, but the party leadership will say, no, we're going to pick that person because they had the best chance of winning. That's going against what the people want and putting the party first. That's why I said the preferred candidates. And if you ever go to vote, or if you've ever voted or worked the polls, and I know some of you have, when you hand out, maybe you've gotten a sample ballot to hand out to someone, if you get that from the Democrats or the Republicans, it will only have their preferred candidates, which makes it gives the aura that these are the people that are running. So that's it. And when I said finance here, it also means that these political parties will throw their money behind certain candidates and others they won't. Government. This is also an area where political parties sometimes work the interest of themselves over the interest of the people. Obviously, transfer of jobs. What I mean by this is, let's say someone's working in the White House or working in an administrative position, and there's a strong political candidate or a strong member of the party that has a very good firm. Well, they can use those connections to help that person in the White House get a job afterward. And this is something called nepotism, where you're given a job based on someone who you know, not necessarily on someone on their merits. And this doesn't just happen in politics, so I don't want to single it out to say it just happens in political parties, but it is a casualty that has to be noted. This is somewhat akin to the spoil system. The spoil system is the idea of the to the winner goes the spoils, and it's the idea of rewarding political jobs like Secretary of State or like the Solicitor General to political friends. Not necessarily, again, based on people that who are necessarily best for the job, but people who helped win an election or who are favorable to the party. This is very popular in the Jacksonian area of democracy. It kind of took a dive. It was very popular with George Washington too, believe it or not, but it took a dive. Let's say it kind of went through the Jefferson area and the Monroe, kind of started going downhill, down through John Quincy Adams even, and then came back up with Jefferson with the Jacksonian democracy area. And so again, the idea that to the victor goes the spoils. They can pick who they want to be in office. You could also see this in the numerous political boss systems of the country. So, for example, Tammany Hall in New York City, or there was a big Democratic entrenchment in Kansas City where the political parties would pay for people to vote for them, so to speak. They would provide certain things for them. They would provide, a free turkey at Thanksgiving, or make sure that they had food. And that, in some ways, did mobilize people. It did get them involved in politics, and you could say that's a good thing. But it also, in some ways, was paying for votes, and people were beginning to going with who was providing for them, and not necessarily taking what was obviously the best for the country, or best in the interest of everyone in the country. And then in this case, lastly, I want to talk about a historical example where government put the political party ahead of the best interest of the country. And this is what I call Hamilton's cabinet. Now, you might be saying, man, Hamilton, is that referring to Alexander Hamilton? Well, yeah, it is actually. And I didn't know Alexander Hamilton was he a president? He's on some money, but was he a president? No, he wasn't. He actually was never, ever president. Trying to think of the best way to summarize this. So, Alexander Hamilton was the first secretary. Drawing a blank. Wasn't Attorney General. He wasn't Secretary of State, Secretary of War. I'll have to double check. He might have been Attorney General, but he was he was the Treasury Secretary. That's right. Treasury Secretary. He was in Washington. He was the very first Treasury Secretary under Washington. And Washington won 2 terms, but Hamilton actually resigned at the end of his first term. So the second term was filled by someone else. This is at the time of 1792 to 1796. And the 2 prominent political parties that were coming to head were the Federalists, which were led pretty much by Alexander Hamilton, and Thomas Jefferson. Alexander Hamilton had a huge influence in who his replacers were. He picked people that were going to advocate the Federalist cause and point George Washington towards the Federalist ideals. Now remember, George Washington didn't like political parties. However, he was a part of one because of that natural tendency. In the next election, John Adams, who was George Washington's vice president, based off at the time the Constitution, because he was second in place, he was also a Federalist, and he inherited Hamilton's cabinet. And I say Hamilton's cabinet because, again, he had a large influence on who those cabinet members were. So, during Adams' reign, we had the Quasi-War. And you may remember this from U.S. history and world history, but the Quasi-War was this debate between the United States on who they should support in the French Revolution. Should they support the revolutionaries, people like Robespierre, and then Napoleon, and generally speaking, the women of the bread riots, and should they support them? Or should they support the British? Now, you remember the British got involved as soon as, for those of you who are in 10th grade or who haven't taken world history yet, the British got involved as soon as King Louis XVI was beheaded. And they got together with the Austrians and the Habsburgs and the Prussians. And they said, we can't let this anarchy in France go on for too much longer. And they declared a war on France. So it was this debate in America. Who do we support? Do we support the French, who are putting off tyranny, or as they saw it, or putting off the monarchy as we did? Or do we support the British, who are trying to make sure that things go by the rule of law and also obviously concerned about their interests? Hamilton really wanted to support the British. He thought that the French would get out of control. He wanted to make sure that we were a strong central government. At the time as well, there was a lot of French ambassadors coming over, or French diplomats coming over to the United States, trying to get support for the new government in France. But obviously Washington and Adams were a little leery of that based off the chaos and the uncertainty of the French Revolution. It's kind of like you would think about the Egyptian or Arab Spring, if you follow that. It's kind of similar. Like, how do we know which government to support? Hamilton was willing to do anything to weaken the French, including taking part or taking over South America, Florida, anything the Spanish belonged to, because the French pretty much under Napoleon were kicking everyone's butt. And he thought, well, if the French take control of Spain, then who's to stop them from getting the rest of the empire in the New World? Adams disagreed with this, though. And Adams had intelligence that there was no intention of the French to go after anyone's empire. In fact, go after the United States. They really wanted to maintain peace with the United States. They obviously had their own issues to sort out. And the Federalists in general at this time, this is the general political party, really wanted to move towards war. They wanted to join in with the British. And they saw that these French supporters in America as a threat. This is the idea of where the Alien and Sedition Acts came from. So Adams, however, did not want to go to war. He did not want to go to war at all. They just got done war. He didn't feel like the United States was strong enough. And so I'm going to play you a clip of a couple people advocating for war from the Federalists. You're going to notice Alexander Hamilton in the first clip, and you'll see John Adams get pretty mad at him. And at the one point, midway through the clip, Hamilton goes to Adams and says, at the end of it, "Remember how you became president? By 3 votes." What do you think he's implying there? That if you don't know the context, the history is that the Federalists had a large part in making sure Adam became president. And they could say, we could take you out of the office if we want to. That's how he was implying the 3 votes. Not necessarily, again, if Adams was the best pick for the country, people wanted him. It was what the party wanted. Then you're going to see another clip where Adams, this is from the HBO miniseries, John Adams, I'm just naming them for you. You're going to see a clip where he's conferring with 2 of his cabinet members, the Secretary of War and the Secretary of State, asking why is he disbanding the military if they want to go to war. So again, many people in the United States don't want to go to war. Adams is trying to do what's best for the country and see how the members of the political party react.
Current hostilities in Europe demand a firm American response, sir.
When the scourge of yellow fever is removed from Philadelphia and the government may resume its work, I will leave Trenton and return to the capital. I intend to deliver our response, Mr. Hamilton. Rest assured of that.
It's a victory for the Britain, as you most surely must. And the Bourbons are likely to regain the throne of France.
Any dealings with the current illegitimate government there could well read down to our detriment.
Leading us back into a war with Britain we can ill afford to wage.
French. You have the French, not the British. Not the British. Emerged victorious. Mr. Hamilton, the pretended Bonapartism within a hair's breadth of victory over most of Europe.
In that regrettable instance, France feel empowered to take possession of valuable strategic territory before France can lay her hands on it. All the territory this side of the Mississippi must be ours.
You would seize Spanish Florida and Louisiana.
And not only this. If Universal Empire is to be the seat of France, we're contented to do things perhaps better than to detach South America from Spain. It is the only chance for which the riches of Mexico and Peru can aid to France. Let us not forget there are those in our own country, sir, who would prefer secession to our continued union. If they should be so bold as to act on their threats, in the event, say, of a French victory, we must be prepared to bring the renegades back into the fold by force if necessary.
In my life, have I heard a man speak more like a fool?
Sir?
Your actions, Mr. Hamilton, would precipitate the very thing that you pretend to protect against, the dissolution of this nation. And I am in possession of intelligence which confirms that we are as likely to find a French army on these shores as we are on the moon. You dream of empire, Mr. Hamilton.
You question my loyalties.
Oh no, Mr. Hamilton, I question your sanity. Now either you are stark raving mad, or I am! Good day, sir!
You would do well to remember, sir, how you became president. By 3 votes.
Good day, General.
Why did you not first consult with us before requesting Congress disband the army?
Your advisors are quiet, gentlemen. I do not intend to enter the new capital with an occupying force following behind me.
You would not have dared to do this if General Washington was still alive.
General Washington was the rightful leader of this army, so I think that you will both agree that he is irreplaceable.
Why on earth would you disband the army when we are preparing for war?
Why on earth do we need an army when we are preparing for peace?
Must abandon this folly of a renewed peace commission.
You may think it folly, Mr. Pickering. I do not.
Should the current crisis be allowed to persist a few months longer, our party could be assured of a favourable outcome in the upcoming election.
Your re-election would be absolutely certain.
Don't speak to me of politics, man.
The people are animated, sir. Remove the French threat and they're likely to desert us.
Government by fear is no government at all, Mr. McHenry.
Your intransigence on this matter, your stubbornness will be our ruin. You would surrender our party's interests to those of Mr. Jefferson and his so-called Republicans.
And you, sirs, are subservient to Hamilton, who ruled General Washington and would rule me if he could.
I protect...
Mr. Jefferson, whom you despise, is an infinitely better man. I would rather be vice president under him or resident minister to the Barbary pirates than be indebted to a creature such as Hamilton for my present post. Now your immediate resignations will be accepted, gentlemen.
I do not feel it my duty to resign.
Excellent. Then you leave me with the far more satisfying remedy of removing you from office. Both of you.
I'm back. So just to summarize, at the end, you saw McHenry and Pickering saying that if they kept up this war fervor that the Federalists tried to pursue this rhetoric saying that they're going to go after the French, it would stir the people up and get them to support the Federalists in the next election. They ended up losing the next election to the Republican Democrats under Jefferson and not go to war. So here's an example of people in government trying to direct the government to pursue the interests of the party, not necessarily the interests of the country. Now, obviously, hindsight's 2020. They didn't know that at the time, but to say it's never happened in history is another thing. So political parties also corrupt the media. For example, in 1796, there was the paper called the Philadelphia Aurora. Now, remember, Philadelphia was the capital city. This paper was owned by the Democrat Republicans. So it wasn't just the Federalists that were corrupt, so to speak. And obviously, you would think the media or a paper is designed to report the news. Media has a bias. And in this case, it was purely to promote propaganda or news articles that would be harmful to the Federalists. And the Federalists had their papers too. And this happens today. We'll talk about the media a little bit more. But if you look at cable commentaries, there are people who make no whims about it that they are Democrat or Republican. They are going to report stories that are favorable to the party or damaging to their party. That's just what happens. Instead of producing this unbiased reporting, you get biased reporting, and now we have to learn how to sift through that. So, in conclusion, while political parties definitely do a lot of good for the country, we have to ask the question, are they good for the country? And in order to ask that question in its entirety, we have to be aware of the fact that political parties sometimes do pursue their own interests. That's to be given. Now, many of those members would say, well, these are the best interests of the country as well. However, there's been times in history, like I just shown, that wasn't the case, that political parties were pursuing their own interests to keep in power, to maintain power, to receive the kickbacks of government. So, that begs the question, are political parties good for the country? Let me know if you have any questions on this lesson. There is no homework for today. You guys have been working pretty hard lately. And you have to answer that question on your test. So, are political parties good for the country? Have a good day.